Hello and welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Marietta.
And I'm Connie, and today we are here with Melissa Young-Swan, which I love your name, Melissa. Your last name just sounds just beautiful. Anyway, so how do you deal when shit gets real? And just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Melissa Young-Swan. I'm from Southern Illinois. I'm a wife, a mother, and a social worker.
I know, I like it because then it leaves it open to what we're going to talk about. Everybody's going to be like, where are we going?
Versus giving a huge description, then it's like, oh, we're going to just go through each one of these.
Exactly. And since you did bring up the social work, I know I've always found it interesting work, and I know Connie does too. How did you get into being a social worker?
I started out actually in nursing. It wasn't the right fit for me that I found out my third year of nursing school and decided to switch. Social work was the one closest to what I thought would make me happy, and two, I wouldn't have to go to school much longer to finish that. It was most similar in relation to nursing, but mainly it came down to, do I want to make a lot of money and be miserable, or do I want to be very happy and love my job and be happy with what my salary is? And I chose the latter, and glad I did.
Now that just makes sense to me. You have to do it every day. You got to love it.
Yep. I had to go through that same type of situation and choice, but did not choose social work. Because that for sure is not a profession that everybody wants.
No, it's not. And I see so many people who are burnt out, and it just causes you to make bad choices. And it's people's lives that we impact.
Yeah.
And you have to be on it all the time. You really have to know how to self-regulate and know how to put your biases, your personal beliefs aside, and do what's right for a family.
So is it as thankless as people say it is?
It is not.
Ooh.
Not all the time. It was for a very long time. Let me back up. I started in working with older people with developmental disabilities and mental health issues. That was not where my passion lied. It was in, honestly, drug abuse teens was where my passion lied when I was younger. That's due to my husband, actually. And then a shift into child welfare in 2006. And I did foster care for 10 years, and I was tired of terminating parental rights, taking children away from their parents, although that needs to happen. I felt like it was happening too much, that if there had been help in the beginning, that would not have happened, that parents would have gotten the chance to be parents. So I switched to a program called Intact, and that's what we do. We keep families intact. I do remove kids when I need to, but I make sure that I exhaust every single effort possible before I do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's got to be a hard choice sometimes to, like you said, after doing it for 10 years, I don't think I could do it either, even if it is the right choice.
Yes, to look at a child and tell them, they're going, but I honestly, about the time that when they're in the foster care stage, kids know they're not stupid. They know mommy and daddies aren't doing what they're supposed to do. They know that they'll most likely stay with either the relative that they're living with or the foster parents. That's one thing that Illinois is very low on, foster parents. So if anybody is listening and you do live in Illinois and have a desire to help children, becoming a foster parent is the most amazing thing that you could possibly do. But definitely make them for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to, because you know me, I'm Kyle and I would love to be able to adopt. And if Illinois is low, we'd love to be there. But good old military has other plans for us.
We talked about it. And I think that me being a social worker and knowing every aspect of it is what stopped me, because there are so many social workers that aren't good at their job, unfortunately, or not good at their job, more that the lack of instruction, the lack of a good supervisor, and that lack of support causes error in judgment. And you know me, there's no way I could keep my mouth shut. I would be telling them how to run their caseload and telling them what they were doing wrong, and it just wouldn't be a good situation. So although we did start the process, we stopped mid because something was telling me not to do it.
And I assume you can't be your own social worker because that would just be too
Right.
Yeah.
And I can't be with my agency. So I would have to be fostering with a different agency as well. So they have those criteria in place for social workers that do foster, because we do have social workers that foster and they make wonderful foster parents. More power to them. I'm just not one of them on that end. I would rather, I know where my strengths are. My strength is being a social worker in the intact department and helping keep families together. And I'm extremely passionate about that.
So how did your husband influence your decision?
So we got together when he was 14 and I was 16 is when we started dating. And we dated for several years and, would break up in between, get back together on and off for about 10 years. He's an addict and he was a using addict back then. And I got him into several rehabs throughout the time that we were together and saw the good and the bad of it with him. Just going through that experience with him. Actually, one of the rehabs that I had his parents put him in was, it's called Gateway. And that's where I did my internship in college. I thought about working there, but life had other plans and led me other places. But yeah, he played a big part in that. And seeing him then and seeing him now being a recovered addict really helps me in my job, because I do deal with so many addicts and so many parents who are using, and I know the signs very quickly. Addicts think differently than anyone else thinks. They don't have the same brain patterns at all. And understanding that and understanding addiction is really the key to help someone overcome that addiction.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool to have in your toolbox, being able to recognize the signs. And I mean, it stinks that your husband had to go through addiction to be able to recognize those things, but I guess it was meant to be.
We think so. Because we were apart for 20 years in between.
So you have a similar story, a little bit, just the breaking up, getting back together part as Rietta.
Yep.
Yeah, so they were high school sweethearts, which is awesome. Yes. And now, how long have you guys been married now?
We're not together for 20 years, together 6 years ago, and then we've been married for 5.
Such a cool story. See, now you need to write a book.
I've thought about it.
She wants everyone to write a book, though.
When you have a good story.
Yes, I think I have a very interesting story.
You do have a very interesting story.
Well, if you want somebody to crack the whip and get you going to write a book, that's definitely Rietta's key. Because she still texts me and I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to write a book, Rietta. She's like, but how's the book going?
Well, I'll say this. I'll wait until you get back to the States, Ree.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds like Rietta's going to be your ghostwriter.
I've had people ask me to do that before, so it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, people ask and then they disappear.
Actually, I should start jotting some things down before you get back to the States, and then we can compare some notes and work on it.
It's always good to at least write it down, because then, your memories change as you get older. It's just a fact of life. So it never hurts to write stuff down.
I'll start that in my spare time.
In all your spare time.
I think that's my problem with writing a book, is there never seems to be enough time.
No. especially if we're going to try to have another baby. Sheesh.
Yeah, then
Yep.
you're really going to be busy.
As a social worker, when you have like a rough emotional day or a stressful day at work or just in general, how do you cope and unwind?
For me personally, if it's the summertime, I might have a couple drinks by the pool, but that's very rare. Mostly it consists of spending time with my kids and my husband.
Yeah, family is important and can help you through any rough spot.
There's a lot of workers that I see that that I know. It's hard not to, go to drinking or smoking pot or smoking cigarettes. None of those coping mechanisms work for me. I do crafting. I make stuff. I build stuff.
I like it.
That's way healthier than smoking, drinking, or smoking pot.
Yep.
I think so. Although I tend to hurt myself occasionally. So, it's still rough, but, it is a little healthier.
So on to the harder topic, which I've always treaded lightly because it's such a hard thing to talk about, but I'm glad that you're here to talk about it. Melissa actually had a son who was actually born on my birthday. It was like one of the most amazing things ever. I still remember going to the hospital to hold Colton the day you had him. And unfortunately, he left this world very early. So talk to us about Colton, about your son, what he was like, and what ultimately happened to him.
God, that day was so amazing. I ended up having to go in for an emergency C-section, unfortunately, but he came out 7.5 pounds, 19.5 inches long, born on February 16th on Ree's birthday, and everything was good. We didn't think anything was going on with him until about 6 months in, and then he was sick all the time. But through that, he thrived. So very smart, so full of life. He was definitely all boy, loved to take everything apart, even climbed the walls, literally, would wedge himself between the door frame and climb the wall. He had good friends. He lived a very full life, even though it was only 6 years. His girlfriend, he had a little girlfriend. Her name is Marley. Her birthday is in January before he died. He had asked me if he could buy her a ring. So we went to Walmart, and of course he was like, well, I can't give it to her in this box, Mommy. Can we get your fancy box? So of course I had to get my K Jewelers box that one of my rings came in. And he put the little pink ice ring in the box, and he got to give her a ring before he died. That was pretty cool.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's so sweet.
He was very, very sweet like that. And he would get in trouble. God, he would get in trouble all the time. But then when he was in daycare, like I'd come in and he'd be sitting in the office like, son, what'd you do? Well, I pushed a kid. Why'd you push him? Well, he made me mad. Oh, okay. And I mean, he would tell you, yep, that, his teacher, Miss Kimma, and Miss Kimma told me to come in timeout. So I had to come into the office, and I've been sitting here and, flirting with all of the girls, and he was obsessed with blondes. He loved blondes.
Oh my gosh. Little 6-year-old playa.
Yes. Yeah. He had a little 4-pack going almost. Very strong. And although he was sick so much, about the last year of his life, we weren't in and out of doctors like we were. At one point in time, he had to have a port put into his arm surgically in order for him to get rocephalin injections daily. But he just had no immune system. But I thought that he was getting better because we hadn't been to the doctor. So yeah, it was a very big shock when he did. We just didn't know. There wasn't any signs he was healthy as up till then for the past year. And the Friday before he died, he was running up a snowbank with his best friend after school. So yeah, it was very, very sudden. He died on my birthday. That day that he died, his dad and I had split up 6 months prior. He had promised that he was coming over. He never showed up. Colton wasn't feeling good, but he didn't really have a temp. His throat was hurting, so I had him gargle with warm salt water, and he threw up. So I put him in the bathtub and washed him off, and he was lucid at that point. And then it went down really fast. He looked at me and was talking about the cherry on his cake from 2 weeks prior, and I just knew there was something wrong. I ran to the bedroom to get dressed and was going to grab him and his sister, and we were going to go to the emergency room. By the time I got back in there, I hadn't even had a shirt on. I had my bra and jeans on, and he was foaming at the mouth. And I started CPR. While I was doing CPR, I called 911 and continued CPR. And a good friend was the one, his name's Dave Chambers, and he's an amazing man, showed up. He's one of the ambulance drivers, and just swooped him up in his arms and took him. I must have called my mom at some point in time, because then she showed up as the ambulance was leaving. I left my daughter Charlie with her. As I was driving to the hospital, was trying to get a hold of his dad. And of course, he had said he was working, and I found out after calling the coal mines that he was not working. He had been cheating, and he was with another woman at the time. Couldn't find him, was trying to locate him when I should have been focusing on driving and my son. Got to the hospital, and they tried everything they could, and they lost him. And I remember the doctor coming out. By then, somehow Carl was there. He had just got there. The doctor looked at me and couldn't say anything. And I just remember looking at him and saying, he's gone. And he just shook his head, yes. And I fell to the ground and I couldn't move. Everything else kind of was a blur from there. It was light out. It was in the afternoon, and then when we got home, it was dark. So I don't really remember everything that passed between the time we got there. I remember speaking with the police because, of course, anytime a child dies, regardless, there's a child death review of the case every time. So I spoke with the detective, and I had already gone through a child death review with work, good and bad of it. So at least I knew what to expect and what questions and, what they were going to need and, where the investigation was going to go. I remember Carl telling me to wait. He got mad and punched the wall because, of course, all of the attention needed to be on him at that point. Then he was supposed to go get some things and then come back to the house and tell Charlie that her brother was gone with me. And I can remember it taking him very long to show up. And I thought I was going to have to tell her by myself. Although he was there in the room, I still had to tell her by myself that she was never going to see her brother again. So the last time she saw her brother, she was standing over him while I was giving him CPR. Oh. So that's been tough dealing with that with her too. So then, I'm dealing with my grief and her grief. But of course, her grief trumped mine always, and still does, and always will.
Yeah, that's not really the last vision you want her to have of her brother.
Right. And then they have an older sister who's 5 years older than Colton, Bailey, and she's my daughter too. I started being mom to her at age 3. And she has an amazing mom named Britta, who is amazing. She really is. Although that their dad is basically almost completely out of the picture, she still allows me to be mom. She still allows me visitation. I still get her in the summertime. We still do holidays together. Anytime that they live 2 hours away from us, so anytime that we're near where they are, we get to see her. Anytime they're down here, because Britta has family down here, we get to see her. Now that Charlie is older, she's gotten to go up there and stay and do summers up there. Yeah, we do everything we can. The girls talk on the phone, FaceTime, Snapchat, texting, and we do the same. So
Anything to help.
Sweet.
yeah. So I have 4 kids instead of just having 3.
Hey, that's a blessing.
Yes, she is. She's amazing. She actually is, she'll turn 17 in October.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I've been mom since she was 3 years old. So I've been her mom longer than I wasn't. When her dad and I split up, he told her, Melissa is not mommy anymore. She's gone and we're no longer together, which was devastating to her, of course. And I told her, no, that's not right. I've been your mom since you were 3 years old. I will always be your mom. Nothing will ever break that, ever, or take that away from us. And she knows that.
Well, then she's blessed to have 2 moms, 2 wonderful
Yes.
moms.
Thank you.
Was there a final diagnosis of what happened to Colton, or was that just he was just sick and that was just the end?
The final autopsy stated that he died of sepsis, that it went to his brain.
Oh my
But
goodness.
What?
no one knows how he became septic so quickly, and how he was literally 1 minute was talking and the next minute he was gone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that never got answered.
Which has to make it so much harder.
Yeah.
It does. And there's days where I'm like this all day long and I'm crying and I just talk through the tears, and it is what it is. And some days I'm okay and talking about him and laughing and we're okay, but
it really will never be okay because it's your baby.
yes, I have to learn, or had to learn over the years, that it's okay not to be okay. Like, I'm okay with that. Part of my heart left when he did, and that's okay. And I've learned that, there's days where I say, like, now that I have the support of my husband, who is just amazing, I can say, I'm having a bad day. I'm so glad you're home, but I'm going to bed. I can't do anymore. I'm done for the day. And he knows over the years, he's learned. So about October, it starts getting bad, because October we did Halloween up, always Colton and his sister Charlie always in matching costumes. I would start about July figuring out what they were going to be, and then I would make them, and that was just our big thing. And we always went trick-or-treating together, and we would go to the church, would have a fall festival, and we would go trick-or-treating with family. And about October, and then of course then you got November, so Thanksgiving is never good, and then you have Christmas, which Christmas isn't good, and then you have February, which is his birthday, and then turns around March, and March 1st is my birthday, and then also the day he died.
It was just a bad time for birthdays. I know for the longest time when Colton first passed away, I felt so bad that like my birthday was his birthday. I feel like it's tainted.
I'm sorry.
No, I just you don't want to be a part of the bad remembrance. You want to be a part of the good remembrance.
Mhm.
And I don't celebrate my birthday anymore. I can't. I either find something to get my mind off of it, or I just have a complete breakdown.
Yeah. As expected.
And for many years, I would relive every single minute of that day, which people would say isn't healthy. However, I don't think that. Like, it's healthy for me to remember good and bad and be able to fully process that. So I see people when they're grieving, and I hear people say, well, it's time for you to move on. And there's nothing worse to say, especially to a grieving mother, because it's not natural to lose your child.
Yeah.
It's natural, to lose your parents at a certain age. It's natural once you get older, you're going to lose your siblings. You're going to lose aunt and uncles. But it's not natural to lose your children. And, I think a lot of it comes from people's insecurities about what to say to people when they lose their children. It's okay to say, hey, I miss him. I miss your child. I remember this about your child. Parents want to hear that. If a parent is talking to you ever about the loss of their child and it's making you uncomfortable, learn to be okay with that uncomfortableness if that person is in your life, because they're going to talk about their child, and they should, because that child's life matters. They're still a part, Colton's still a part of our family. Yeah. He's still in everything I do, everything I am, the way that I think, the things that I do with work, the things that I do with, his sisters. And you can see it, that look on people's face when you start talking about your child. Like, I still talk about Colton in the present tense. I'm not for sure if I will ever talk about him in the past tense. That's just me. Plus, it helps Charlie that a part of him is still around, that I talk about him.
I was actually just going to say that because I know before we got on here, you said the bush behind you was Colton's tree. And actually, at certain points when you started talking about him, and even when the wind wasn't blowing, it was like dancing around you. So it's like he's there right now.
Yeah. And I'll never, we've talked about moving before. There's no way I could never leave this house, because I see him in every part of my property. I can see him running around. I can see him climbing trees. I can see him riding his bike, pulling 50-pound chains around the yard at 3. He was actually, a couple months before he passed, was moving cinder blocks for me. Yeah, he was a very, very strong kid. He started riding 4-wheelers when he was very young, and he had his own 4-wheeler. He had his own dirt bike. I think 4, he got his first gun. 5, he got bow and arrow set. And actually, before he died, for his 6th birthday, he wanted a drum set. At the time, was getting no help whatsoever. I was having to keep a roof over that did not change one bit. He wanted a drum set, so that's what I got him. He got a very expensive several $1,000 drum set. I got very, very blessed to find somebody who really needed cash at the time and got it for a very good price, and he got his full-fledged badass drum set. There's a tree actually that I'm looking over at. It's referred to as Colton's peeing tree. That's where he would go pee after he was gone. She would still pee at his peeing tree. Cars would drive by. I wouldn't care. I'm just like, whatever.
I mean, at least it's your yard, people can't really say anything. Be like, it's my house.
Yes. And when you live on 5.5 acres, yeah, it's like, yeah, we don't really care what anyone else says. We don't have neighbors. We own a large field between one of our neighbors, and their country as can be, so they don't care what happens. They're usually out at, midnight shooting guns.
What advice would you give to people who are grieving?
don't give yourself a timetable. Never go the steps like, oh, I should be on forgiveness. There is no timetable. You do you. Every single person is different. No one's the same. I don't care who you are. And each person's grief is different. Each person's process is different. You need to have the ability to process at your pace and in the manner that works for you. And when I say that, obviously, I do not endorse grieving through alcohol or drug use. Although I had many people come to me and say, I have no idea how you're not, an alcoholic right now.
Valid question.
I was on medication. It's amazing how much Xanax you can get when you lose a child. No questions asked. Here you go. So for about 6 months, I was on Xanax. I would not take it if I was the sole caregiver of my daughter, Charlie. I always made sure that someone else was around, because when I would take it, I would lose track of time. I would be one place, and then it was like I would completely lose touch with reality, where I had no idea what was going on. I would become lucid and be in a completely different location and have no idea how I got there.
That's like that movie. What was that movie? He was Limitless, right? He was taking stuff and like all of a sudden he was in a different place. Like you experienced your own Limitless.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I was out one night with family, and I can remember telling everybody bye and giving them hugs and kisses and, hey, I'll see you guys later. And the next minute I was in bed and I have no idea how I got from point A to point B. And that is very scary. And just because I know already from social work, from nursing background, the side effects of medication, I always ensured that if I felt like I needed to take medicine, that if I was to that point that I wasn't able to function and I needed help, that someone else was there to take care of Charlie. But that was few and far between. Usually I would, like at night after she would go to bed, that's when I would take medicine in order to, yeah, definitely. The first year is definitely the roughest. It helped me to make a different plan. So like the first year for Halloween, instead of being at home, we went up to St. Louis and stayed with family. Thanksgiving, my goal was to get as drunk as possible and stay drunk the entire day. I did that very, very well. I managed to accomplish that. That's just, for me, I'm like, I just needed a day, and I knew that there would be an immense amount of family around to take care of my daughter. I just needed to escape. Now, my husband and I got back together. There is a radio station, Z100, in Southern Illinois.
I remember Z100.
Kent Zimmer is amazing personality, an amazing man, period. So every Friday they play Eastbound and Down, the Friday version, and it's a little tweaked, but it still has a lot of the main song. So every Friday, we always on the way to school would listen to Eastbound and Down. Colton loved that song, and actually it was played at his funeral. And so Kent got on there and dedicated the Eastbound and Down to Colton. So he died on a Sunday. And so then we waited until that Saturday for his funeral, because I knew so many kids would want to come to his funeral and pay respects to him. And I didn't want to interfere anymore with their schedule. I didn't want them to be taken out of school to go to a funeral. We chose to do it on a Saturday. So then, yeah, that Friday, Kent Zimmer dedicated Eastbound and Down, and my husband had heard it. He reached out to me actually on Facebook, and as we all know, sometimes Facebook Messenger will put into the other box.
Spam folder. Yeah.
Yes. And that's where it went to. And so it took several months, about 2 or 3 months until, we met back up. But yeah, him coming into the picture was definitely an amazing blessing and helped. And we've been together ever since. He's been a blessing for our daughter, Charlie. My oldest three's dad decided to fall off the face of the earth. I don't know if it was the grief that's been too hard. I don't know if it's his own insecurities, his own issues that he deals with himself. I'm not for sure, but for whatever reason, he's made those choices and we're okay with that. Charlie has grown up because, of course, she was 5 when Colton died, and she is now 11. So really, my husband, Michael, is the only dad she's ever known. She really doesn't remember her biological father, which is heartbreaking also. So, we had to go through that grief as well of him being gone. Any parent who has that, you either work it out as far as for the child, and I would have been more than happy to. It just wasn't an option, unfortunately. But Michael really stepped up to the plate, and that's her dad. And she'll tell you, like, she knows Carl's my father. He's the one who, made me with my mommy, but Michael's my dad. He's the one who goes to, the ball games and the recitals and, does everything with her and coaches ball teams and goes and watches her at basketball. He's the one who's there every day, day in and day out. And Carl just wasn't able to be that kind of dad, which again is okay. And I've explained to Charlie that, hopefully one day they can reconnect when it's healthy for her. Right now, it's just not. He's not a bad person. He never has been. He's made bad choices and bad decisions, and that's just a fact of life. She would get very angry. I hate him. He left us and he doesn't care. And, I've told her several times, like, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be mad at him, but it's not okay to hate him because, Carl is an amazing guy. There's amazing parts of him, and I got all 3 of them. And I'm very, very blessed for that. I wouldn't have ever had Bailey, Colton, or Charlie if it wasn't for him. So I love him, and I always will. I hear people say that, like, everything happens for a reason. No, God doesn't put more on us than we can handle. God has a plan for our lives. God didn't plan to take my 6-year-old son away from me. There's good and there's bad in this world. And unfortunately, the bad is what took him away from me. So I've never, I've dealt with being angry with God that he didn't intervene, but never really angry with God where I turn my back on him. Yeah, that whole everything happens for a reason. Things do happen for a reason, but things also happen for a reason that's bad. Things don't always happen for a reason that's good. And there's a difference.
I'll tell you one thing, Charlie's going to be a tough cookie.
She's the only, I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for her. Being her mom, again, was more important than me grieving, more important than anyone else. Like when my husband and I started dating, of course, I kept that from her for a very long time. He wasn't allowed to come around. He would come by very, very late at night, and we would sit on the porch and talk. He wasn't allowed in the house. He wasn't allowed around her at all until I knew that it was going somewhere. And actually, she and I went swimming at Wren Lake, and we had been texting, I'd been texting, and I told him we were going to be there. So if you talk to her, she first met her daddy. We found him at the beach.
Oh.
So she had no idea that at all that we were talking. She just thinks that we just happened to be
Appeared.
there. Yeah, he was there the same day, and that's where we found Daddy. Except for now that she's a little bit older, she'll ask questions like, "Why was Daddy at the beach? Because he doesn't like the water."
I like her story better. It seems more romantic. I met Daddy at the beach.
Yes,
It
yes,
does.
yes. Yeah, and he really, really stepped into that role with her gradually. Like he never pushed himself on her, but they bonded right away. And she never really had a bond with her biological father. Unfortunately, Colton did.
I feel like
But
that's a boy thing, the boys bond.
yes, except for it was different. Like when he left in October of the year before Colton died. And I can remember Colton saying, "I'm glad Daddy left. I don't get yelled at anymore."
Well, there you go.
So, it was good at that 6 months. And, and I hate to say this, I'm completely selfish in this. I am glad looking back that he left. I wish that he would have stayed gone the whole entire time. Of course, he was in and out a little bit. He gave me 6 months with our kids by myself. And, and we tried to get back together. It did not work. And I can remember Colton and I sitting on the bed, and his clothes were in the corner of the room. And he says, "Why is Daddy's clothes still here?" And I said, "Well, he hasn't completely moved out." And he goes, "Well, why don't you just take them out in the front yard and burn them?" I said, "Well, buddy, that really wouldn't be a nice thing to do." And he goes, "Why? That's what he would do with your stuff." So,
He
kids
knows.
kids know. They're not stupid. They know who loves them. They know who's in their lives. And you choose, and it's a daily thing, like especially for parents, mother or father. I see, I place children with their fathers all the time, but it's an effort, and it's a conscious effort. Unfortunately, some men, some women even, although we have the ability to be parents, that doesn't mean that we were born to be parents. And I've
Absolutely.
explained that to Charlie, that it is okay that, Carl could do what he was able to do, and that's all he can. We have, her dad, my husband, and we are very blessed with that. I've never, and I will never talk negatively about their dad ever. I may be upset with him talking to a friend or talking to my husband when she's very much away and unable to hear anything I say, but never in front of her. And I really wish more parents thought that way.
Absolutely.
I see that with my stepdaughter. My husband has a 16-year-old, and she was told her entire life how horrible her dad was and what an awful man he was, and just always bad stuff. He wasn't allowed to be a dad. Not saying he was perfect by any means, but he wasn't even allowed to be any kind of father. So, moms, when you do have split relationships, allow them, especially if they're able to, if they're healthy man and they want to be dad, let them be dad. Don't trash your exes in front of your kids, because there's no different than if you're sitting there saying, "Well, he's a piece of shit," you might as well look at your kid and say, "Half of you is shit." And that's not okay for kids to be grown up like that.
No, definitely not.
And so, I tell her all the time, I see her older sister in her. I see nothing of Carl in her, but I see Bailey in her. They have the same feet, which is just this, and the same mannerisms. Like they're not together all the time, but they have so much in common. But neither of them remind me of their dad. They just remind me of each other. We go in and out of counseling. Actually, she's getting ready to start counseling again next week, because I feel as her mom that she needs to get this time. Hormones are changing and things are changing, and she needs to start talking to someone. I just really keep mindful of the signs with her.
What are the
It's
signs?
every day is different. She will become reclusive when she's kind of missing him. She has also, she has a phone that she's had for a year. I keep an eye on it very, very closely. And she has been texting herself and has got a conversation going on with her brother where he's texting back to her, where she's the one who's texting. Had I not been one of those parents that snoop into their child's phone, which I'm not snooping, I should say, looking into their child's phone, because she knows that I do, I would not have seen that. Just being aware, get off your phones, get off the TV, play with them, be outside with them, be a part of their lives. Don't let their lives pass you by. That's the only way you'll ever know any sort of sign with your child. And every child's different, so every sign is different. She and I have a very close bond. One, because, of losing Colton, and we were the only two here, but I nursed her for 4.5 years. So nursing her for 4.5 years, gets you a nice bond with your child. I'm a big, firm believer in breastfeeding, and I'm constantly pushing that with people, but some people can't, unfortunately, and I hate that for them when they can't. But when you can, you need to. Don't let that opportunity pass you by for that connection with your child. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of Colton's issues with his immune system was because I couldn't breastfeed him. My milk just never came in right. I tried and tried and tried, and it just didn't. So when I got pregnant with my youngest, who is now 2.5, one, I refused to have a C-section because to me, in my head, C-sections mean I'm going to eventually have a dead child. Not breastfeeding means to me, I'm eventually going to have a dead child. 32 hours of labor with her, massive hemorrhaging. And I can remember my husband coming and standing by my side and saying, "Are you sure you can continue this? Are you sure we don't need to have a C-section?" I'm like, she is coming out of me the natural way, unless she is in distress or I'm in distress. And right now I don't need a blood transfusion, so I'm good. We're doing this. I was dead set, and luckily the doctor was too, and I was able to breastfeed her for a year and have her naturally. So that was a big blessing. And she has her brother's initials. His name is Colton Lee, and her name is Coraline Lee. The Lee is spelled different because the Lee came from Carl's father, but Charlie is spelled with Lee in it. So she is Charlee. So all three of them have the Lee in their names, and we all have double letters. So I have the double S's. Colton and Charlie have the double E's. So when I went to go spell Coraline's name, she is spelled different as well. So she has 2 L's in her name.
I love it. I love all the positivity that you're surrounding yourself with after all the hard.
You get those people that are, well, you just wanted another baby so you could try to replace your son.
No.
No.
Yeah.
There's no replacing.
There's no replacing a baby.
People who are grieving that do have children after the death of a child, you always will see different things in that child that remind you of the child you lost. Coraline is not a typical girl. She is all boy. She's rough and she's tough, and she reminds me of him, and it freaks people out when I will say, God, Colton would do that, or she'll do something like, oh man, or she'll look at me and I'm like, she looks just like Colton. And I had someone tell me, you shouldn't put that on her, telling her she's like Colton, telling her she looks like Colton. I wholeheartedly disagree, and I will. Thank you.
I would too. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with having a reminder of Colton.
This is the way that I look at it. No one has a problem comparing her to her sisters. She's got 3 sisters, and no one has problem comparing her to any of her sisters. But they have an issue with me comparing her to her brother. Just because he's in heaven doesn't diminish the fact that they're
still brother and sister.
Yes. And they're so much alike. And I had a dream while I was pregnant with her And he came to me in that dream and he said, Mommy, I'm helping God. I helped God make my sister. God let me help him.
Oh.
So, that's a story, I will tell her, even though, she knows. You show her a picture of Colton and she'll say, that's my bubby.
Oh, how sweet.
We
That's so
had a
sweet.
picture. Charlie made a picture frame and his picture was with us at the hospital. It was with her in her nursery bed. So yeah, I've got his pictures, pictures hanging on the wall. Pictures are everywhere. He's never gone. He's still here and he always will be.
It's beautiful.
Wow, Melissa, you've done such a great job with this podcast episode. I think you answered questions before we could even ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a beautiful spot to end it on, of always keeping him around and always having him around. And I still have the picture you gave me of both him and Charlie. So it's always good to keep those around.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you for coming onto the show so much, Melissa.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. This was a nice experience. I hope that it helps people. And, and also like, I'm willing to give my personal email address if anyone who is listening would like to reach out, talk, or has questions, is going through the early stages or even later stages or in between of grief and loss. My email address is Young-Swan, MYOUNG SWAN @gmail.com. So I'm available if anyone ever wants to reach out.
That's so sweet of you. I hope you can help somebody.
Me too.
I hope our listeners will reach out.
Me too. Thank you guys both so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
We enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, and thank you for being willing to talk about something that is, I imagine, not easy to talk
very
about.
painful, yeah. So this is how to deal when shit gets real. Make sure to check out the new episodes every Friday and follow us on the social medias. Join us next Friday, guys.